Imagine a silence so deep it feels heavy, a silence that has lingered for an eternity. Feel the heat rising from the ground, under a sun that glows pale in a washed-out sky, a sun that feels familiar and yet utterly alien. This is not Mars, nor some distant exoplanet from a science fiction tale. This is home. This is Earth, but an Earth you would not recognize. An Earth from a time before time as we measure it. Before the birds, before the flowers, before the first true dinosaurs pressed their footprints into the mud. You are standing at the heart of one immense land, a single, endless continent, Pangea. And around it, stretching without end, lies a single world-spanning ocean, Pangea. In this world of extremes, science searches for humble beginnings, the first fragile steps onto land, the slow greening of a barren planet. But what if we are looking for the wrong story? What if the grandest story has already been told, and all that remains is its fading echo? What if, in the heart of this ancient supercontinent, there existed not only primal struggles, but a civilization so old that the mountains they once gazed upon have long since crumbled back into dust? To glimpse the ghost of such a world, we must first let the noise of our own slip away. The concerns of the day, the lists of tomorrow, let them dissolve into the quiet of this moment. Let your shoulders loosen, let your breath fall into rhythm. The night settles gently around you, and together we begin a journey across an ocean of time to the shores of a lost world. The number itself is a chasm that the human mind can scarcely cross. 250 million years. Try, if you can, to imagine it. Imagine compressing the entire history of Earth since that time into a single film, where each year lasts only a second. You would sit, unblinking, unbreathing, for nearly 8 continuous years. No meals, no sleep, no pause for thought. And in that relentless torrent of time, the entirety of human civilization, from the construction of the pyramids to the launch of rockets, piercing the heavens, would flare into existence in the final hour of the last day, a brief incandescent spark, fragile and fleeting in an ocean of darkness. This span of time is not merely long, it is incomprehensible. It is as if the earth itself were holding its breath, shaping, breaking, and remaking itself, slowly but with absolute persistence. While Pangea basked beneath its sun, the solar system itself was traveling through an alien quadrant of the Milky Way. The stars in the night sky were completely unfamiliar, distant suns whose light had never touched our eyes. The constellations we know now did not exist. They were replaced by forms that vanished eons ago, celestial arrangements as foreign to us as the world we are trying to imagine. Between that ancient time and our own stretches a procession of vanished worlds. The age of dinosaurs rose, dominating the earth for over 150 million years, only to vanish in a blaze of celestial fire. Then came the age of mammals, a slower, more patient unfolding of new forms, new experiments in life. Creatures evolving quietly, while continents drifted, oceans shifted, and climates changed in ways almost imperceptible to any one generation. Ice ages crept and retreated, glaciers miles thick advancing over the continents like immense, grinding knives, sculpting and scouring the land with an almost cruel patience. Each epoch is a world unto itself, a chapter so vast that it would take lifetimes to perceive fully. Yet all of them lie layered upon the world we now seek, a sedimentary blanket of time, miles thick, burying any potential trace of what might have existed before. To search for a civilization on Pangea is to attempt the impossible, to see through all that has come since, to peer past the age of ice, past the age of mammals, past the cataclysm that annihilated the dinosaurs, and glimpse a world on the far side of a vast forgetting. And what was that world truly like? The air itself was different, denser, richer in oxygen. It would have pressed upon the lungs with a weight unfamiliar to modern breathing. This heavier air may have allowed life of an entirely different scale. Insects, vast as birds, amphibians, towering over what we recognize today. The sounds were primitive and elemental, the hiss of wind across endless stone, the crash of waves along coasts that stretched unbroken for thousands of miles, the distant rumble of a volcano's awakening. There were no birdsong greetings at dawn, no soft hum of bees in fields of flowers, for flowers did not yet exist. The soundscape was guttural, elemental, and under it all lay a silence deeper still, a silence that seemed to occupy space itself. The flora was a kingdom of green and brown. Forests of giant tree ferns swayed in imagined winds, cycads clustered densely, but none of the delicate petals, the brilliant colors, or the subtle fragrances that now animate our world had yet emerged. The beauty here was severe and raw, an austere power carved into the land itself. Life clung tenaciously to the edges of deserts and thrived in monsoon-soaked coastal regions. Creatures neither fully reptile nor fully mammal, the diverse synapsids, roamed this land in intricate ecosystems, only to have them utterly annihilated in the Permian extinction, leaving the canvas wiped clean, erased at a planetary scale. And the force behind this erasure, the planet itself, Earth, is not a museum of the past. It is a living, breathing entity that digests its own history. Its memory is geological, not historical. Its primary function is not preservation, but transformation. And in that process, forgetting. This is the truth of plate tectonics. What feels beneath our feet as solid and permanent is, in truth, a thin, fractured crust floating atop a mantle of rock softened by immense heat and pressure. These plates move imperceptibly at a pace comparable to the growth of fingernails, yet over millions of years. This imperceptible movement unmakes and remakes the surface of the earth with an inexorable patience. Imagine, if you can, a city built by this hypothetical civilization, a marvel of engineering on the shores of Panthalassa. Imagine it standing for 10,000 generations, proud and enduring. Now watch as the tectonic plate beneath it slowly collides with another. Over 10 million years, the edges of the continent buckle, and the ground where the city once stood is forced downward, inch by agonizing inch, into the molten embrace of the planet. This is subduction, the Earth's digestive process. As the crust descends, pressure mounts, heat intensifies beyond anything human engineering could contain. The very rock of the city melts. Not merely destroyed, not simply buried, but unmade, dissolved back into the primal chaos of the magma from which it was formed, absorbed into the convective currents of the mantle. This material may churn for hundreds of millions of years before perhaps being extruded as new rock, on a new continent, in a new world, an eternity later. Every monument, every foundation, every microscopic trace is sterilized by heat and pressure, returned to the elemental furnace of the planet. It is destruction at an atomic level, total and complete. And what of those settlements that escaped fiery recycling? Perhaps they were built deep within continental interiors, away from tectonic fury. Here, the planet wields a slower but no less relentless instrument of erasure, erosion. Mountains, symbols of seeming permanence, are born to die. Wind tirelessly sculpts, rain dissolves chemical bonds, water seeps into cracks, freezes, expands, wedges stone apart, particle by particle. Rivers born from these heights carry the debris away, depositing it upon the ocean floor, forming layers of sediment that will, in time, be buried, compressed, and perhaps someday consumed again in the fire of subduction. Everything on the Earth's surface is subject to this cycle. Cities, monuments, pyramids, the grandest human creations are, for the planet, simply another form of rock. Wind and rain care not for carved granite or raw stone. Both are ground to dust. A civilization's vast footprint, spread across millions of square miles, may vanish entirely, buried beneath miles of sediment over the course of geological time, leaving no shadow of its existence. The obstacle, therefore, is not a mere absence of evidence. It is a fundamental absence of a medium in which evidence could survive. We are not searching for a needle in a haystack. We are searching for a needle in a haystack that was burned, then scattered by a hurricane lasting hundreds of millions of years. The Earth has not simply hidden its past, it has systematically dismantled it. Land has disappeared, rocks have been reborn, oceans reconfigured. How, then, do we continue? If we search for buildings, tools, carvings, or bones, we are seeking ghosts in a world that has become a ghost itself. The very ground is alien to the time we wish to visit. Our approach must change. We cannot be archaeologists of objects. We must become forensic detectives of shadows, of echoes, of faint chemical signatures etched deep within the planet's crust. We search not for artifacts, but for the subtle, persistent ghosts of what once was civilization so pervasive, so strange. that even the relentless recycling of the earth may not have been able to erase it completely. And so our journey shifts. The initial awe at the vastness of time and the relentless violence of geology now gives way to a quieter, more focused intensity. We can no longer be mere spectators of this lost world. We must become its coroners, its detectives. Our search is not for a body, for we have already understood that the body has long been rendered back into dust and fire. Instead, we are here to investigate the physics of its disappearance, to search for the subtle disturbances it left behind in the very fabric of the planet. We must examine Earth itself as both the scene of the crime and the silent, traumatized witness. This is a forensic investigation on a geological scale. The evidence is not found with a shovel and brush, but with seismic sensors that listen to the heartbeat of the deep earth, with mass spectrometers that can taste the atomic composition of a stone, and with a form of speculative logic that dares to ask impossible questions. We are searching for the planetary equivalent of a ghostan entity whose presence is defined only by the subtle ways its absence feels unnatural. Clues are faint, shadows in the record of time, whispers buried in the strata. A civilization, if it existed, would have left traces, not in grand monuments, but in the very way the earth remembers itself. Our first line of inquiry takes us deep into the earth's memory, into the library of stone, where the planet writes its own autobiography. Here, each layer is a page, each page a chronicle of ages. Sandstone, siltstone, shale, and limestone, these are more than rock. They are a record of wind, water, fire, and life. We are searching for a page that has been tampered with, a chapter where the language of nature falters, where something has been written in a foreign ink. Geological scars. Imagine a vast, fertile plain, irrigated by rivers, redirected by invisible hands, canals and terraces carved across a continent, millennia before human eyes would see them. The soil, rich and uniform, year after year, century after century, eroding into the oceans in a perfect rhythm, creating a layer of sediment so consistent it would seem unnatural to the geologist of the distant future. It would be a scar of intention and note in the symphony of chaos that is Earth, sustained, deliberate, and wholly alien to the random hand of nature. Or consider the extraction of resources, mountains quarried for their mineral wealth, coastal shelves dredged for ores. Imagine this on a Pangea scale, a civilization reshaping entire continents for their survival or ambition. Over millions of years, these acts would not merely vanish, they would leave a subtle, negative signature, a mineral stratum missing elements that should naturally be present, a void in the Earth's story, a shadow that speaks of absence rather than presence. The planet itself becomes a witness, whispering of what was taken, long after the actors have turned to dust. Yet these overt signs are ephemeral compared to the subtler, more enduring clues written into life itself. The fossil record, that grand improvisational manuscript of evolution, contains its own mysteries. Life's story is a tale of trial and error, of sudden radiations and catastrophic collapses. The Permian-Triassic extinction, the Great Dying, saw over 90% of marine species and 70% of terrestrial vertebrate species vanish. Nature's reset button, pressed with unmatched ferocity. Yet, within the chaos of recovery, we might search for anomalies that defy explanation. Picture a creature thriving where all others struggle, adapted in ways too precise, too purposeful, to be mere chance. Could this be evidence of a guiding hand, a last desperate act of preservation by a civilization that knew the end was near? It is a living artifact, written into DNA, a faint message embedded in the very code of life. These are not monuments or cities. They are enduring biological ghosts. Now, imagine a different signal, one preceding the Great Extinction. A simplification of the biosphere, fewer species, vast monocultures, a landscape dominated by a handful of hardy organisms. This, too, could be a footprint, a signature of planetary-scale agriculture or management, leaving traces long before the volcanic eruptions and climate upheavals completed their work. And yet, even these are subtle, and perhaps still insufficient. For the most persistent marks of intelligence may not be found in the macroscopic record at all. We must look to the atomic level, where matter itself records history. Elements, with their isotopes, are letters written in nature's alphabet. Carbon, oxygen, uranium all carry specific ratios, natural distributions that have persisted for eons. The activities of an industrial civilization disrupt this balance, creating anomalies detectable millions of years later. Carbon-12, enriched through combustion of fossil fuels, leaves a subtle fingerprint. Uranium fission leaves daughter products where none should exist. These are echoes, chemical whispers of a world that once was. Consider the scale of these isotopic anomalies. Small shifts, almost imperceptible, yet sustained over time, can define the difference between chaos and intention. Plutonium, technetium, americium, synthetic elements with near infinite persistence in the geological record. Even as millennia pass, their decay products remain, a radioactive whisper that time itself cannot fully erase. Alone, each of these signs sedimentary uniformity, biological anomalies, isotopic shifts could be attributed to natural forces, rare events, or random coincidence. But together, they form a pattern, a convergence of improbabilities so intricate, so interwoven, that the simplest explanation is no longer natural randomness, but deliberate action. A civilization's fingerprint, etched into the very earth, persists even when cities have crumbled, mountains have vanished, and the oceans have shifted. To search for these ghosts is to engage in a meditation on absence. The tools are subtle: spectroscopy, isotope ratio, mass spectrometry, sedimentological analysis, and deep contemplative reasoning. But equally important are the senses, the imagination, the capacity to perceive the earth not as a static museum, but as a living, remembering organism. We must listen to its sighs in the wind-swept canyons, feel its pulse in the tremors of subducting plates, and see its history in the layers of stone that rise like pages from the depths. And in this pursuit, patience is everything. 1,000,000 years is not long for the planet. An anomaly recorded in stone must be traced, measured, understood. What seems subtle in one momentan, unusual sediment layer, a thriving survivor, a shift in isotopes may, in combination with other signs, reveal an intelligence long gone. We are detectives of time itself, reading the faint signature of what cannot be seen, felt only as an uncanny sense of purpose, embedded in the very world. Yet there is also poetry here. Imagine the silence of a world that has outlived its caretakers. The wind sweeping across empty plains where canals once redirected rivers. The ocean whispering to a shore that no longer bears footprints. Stones recording a narrative invisible to ordinary eyes. And in this silence, a meditation, the earth is patient. It holds its secrets in the slow dance of atoms and the rhythm of tectonic plates. It does not hurry, it does not forget hastily. Every signal, every scar, every anomaly is preserved in its own tempo, waiting for a mind willing to perceive it. This is the essence of the forensic hunt, to see absence as presence, emptiness as information. The tools of the investigator are both technological and philosophical. We scan, measure, and analyze, but we also imagine, hypothesize, and wonder. Each clue, no matter how subtle, becomes part of a mosaic, a story reconstructed from the echoes of time. And so we proceed, guided by both rigor and reverie. The search is as much about understanding ourselves as it is about understanding a hypothetical Pangean civilization. By seeking the fingerprints of a long-vanished intelligence, we confront the impermanence of our own endeavors. The earth is indifferent, yet meticulously preserving the memory of what it has witnessed. In the convergence of geological, biological, and isotopic anomalies, we may glimpse the trace of minds that thought, acted, and ultimately disappeared, leaving behind only whispers in stone, in sediment, in the subtle chemistry of a world. It is a story of extremes, of vast time and subtle evidence, of the grand and the infinitesimal. Every river, every windstorm, every chemical ratio is a chapter in this story. And the hunter, scientist, philosopher, dreamer must read carefully, patiently, reverently. Perhaps, at the end of this pursuit, we find nothing. Or perhaps, in the faintest whisper, we detect the unmistakable pulse of a world once shaped by thought, by intention, by civilization. It is a meditation on what endures, what is erased, and what leaves a mark so subtle that it can only be perceived when one listens deeply and with wonder. And so we pause. We stand at the edge of an immense thought, having followed whispers of stone and echoes of life, tracing traces that may no longer exist. The hunt for these geological ghosts, this meditation on absence, could seem like a journey into myth alone, spun from delicate threads of wonder. Yet the path we walk, though shrouded in the mists of deep time, is tethered to the solid, observable world. The questions we ask, however improbable they may sound in the quiet of the night, echo in the halls of modern science. Our speculative search for a lost world rests upon the firm foundation of what we know to be true about our own. To understand the ghost we pursue, we must first understand the unforgiving reality of the house it might have haunted. We have already glimpsed this reality, the law of forgetting, written into the very core of the planet. Plate tectonics, subduction, mantle convection, and the slow, inexorable power of erosion are not abstract ideas. They are the bedrock of our understanding. They are the physical rules of the game, the relentless forces that erase histories and obliterate evidence. Mountains are born, and yet, in their imperceptible decay, they too vanish. Oceans rise, seas retreat, continents collide and drift apart. In this ceaseless, metabolic recycling of the Earth's surface, any civilization, no matter how vast, is confronted with the inevitability of disappearance. We hunt for ghosts precisely because we know with scientific certainty that the bodies themselves have long since been unmade. Pause and consider the implications. Every stratum of rock is a page in the Earth's autobiography. Each layer records the slow evolution of climates, oceans, and life. In these pages, we search for anomalies, the traces left by forces that do not belong to pure nature. Yet the Earth is an artist of chaos. Rivers carve unpredictable paths, deserts bloom and vanish, ice sheets expand and retreat. Uniformity is rare, and still we imagine the impossible, a civilization so vast, so meticulous, that it might leave a scar distinguishable from the randomness of the natural world. This scar is subtle. It may be chemical, isotopic, or biological, but it endures, quietly, in the language of stone. With this foundation, let us examine the grand events that shaped the world we now seek. Our gaze turns to the cusp of the Permian-Triassic boundary, a moment of planetary calamity, the most profound extinction in complex life's history, the Great Dying. This is our second anchor in reality, a scar in the geological record so immense that it renders the later extinction of dinosaurs comparatively minor. Here, the Earth has written its own story in fire, ash, and death. Imagine the world of the late Permian, a tapestry of life stretching across Pangea's vast continents. Tusked, herbivorous dicynodonts grazed in herds, their movements slow and deliberate across arid plains. Saber-toothed gorgonopsians prowled as apex predators, silent shadows in the twilight. Oceans teemed with trilobites and coral reefs of forms that would never again exist. Life was abundant, complex, layered in its beauty, and ancient in its memory. And then, in a geological heartbeat, nearly all was extinguished. The prime suspect, etched into stone, is a feature known as the Siberian traps, Picture not a volcano, but a planetary hemorrhage. For nearly 1 million years, the crust split open, releasing magma that flooded an area larger than modern Europe, forming layers of basalt thousands of feet thick. This slow fever gripped the planet. The lava alone did not kill. Rather, it was the consequences. Trillions of tons of carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide poured into the atmosphere, triggering a runaway greenhouse effect. Global temperatures soared. Oceans, absorbing the excess carbon, became acidic, dissolving shells and skeletons. Stagnant, oxygen-starved waters expanded, and in the deepest reaches, the oceans may have turned a sickly purple, belching hydrogen sulfide, a silent killer across land and sea. This vision of hell was real, not metaphorical planet choking under the weight of its own geological fury. Yet, even in the most horrific catastrophes, imagination invites questions. Could this narrative, as terrifying as it is, be incomplete? Could a civilization, already stressing its environment, have nudged the Earth over the brink? Perhaps their industrial activity, their burning of fossil resources, subtly destabilized an already fragile biosphere. The Siberian traps might not have been just a natural phenomenon. They might have been, in part, the aftermath of a civilization's own undoing. Was their technology powerful enough to reshape the world? Could an ambitious geoengineering project or a weapon of unimaginable scale have left a mark now indistinguishable from natural disaster? The fossil record gives us extinction, but what if it also hides the echoes of intelligence lost to time? This line of inquiry is not fantasy. It is grounded in serious science. It is known as the Silurian Hypothesis, proposed by astrophysicist Adam Frank and climate scientist Gavin Schmidt. The hypothesis asks, if an industrial civilization existed on Earth millions of years before our own, what traces would it leave? How could future geologists discern it? The idea is named for an intelligent reptilian species from Doctor Who, but its scientific value is far from fiction. It is a rigorous attempt to understand our own civilization from the perspective of deep time. The Silurian hypothesis confronts the problem of geological erasure directly. A city, a tool, a fossilized machine, these are almost certainly gone. The Earth does not preserve artifacts perfectly. It obliterates them with patient efficiency. What remains are indirect signatures, unusual chemical ratios, isotopic spikes, synthetic elements, or sedimentary anomalies. Carbon isotopes, for example, can record the combustion of fossil fuels. Nitrogen ratios may hint at extensive agriculture. Plastics or synthetic molecules, even after breakdown, can leave a faint carbon signature. Nuclear activity could leave radioactive traces in rocks for millions of years. The fingerprints of intelligence, when viewed through the lens of time, are subtle but enduring. Let us pause to visualize this. Imagine drilling a core into the Earth, 250 million years removed from the Permian. You see layers of mudstone, shale, and basalt, formed naturally over eons, but here one layer seems uniform, unnaturally so. Its chemical composition is precise, consistent, and out of place. Within this, the fossil record shows oddities, a sudden dominance of a species unusually resilient, or the absence of those that should thrive. The isotopes tell a quiet story. Carbon skewed, elements rare, a trace of power once wielded. Alone, these anomalies are curious. Together, they form a fingerprint, elegant, almost poetic signature of something once intelligent and capable. Returning to the Permian, consider the fragility and adaptability of life. The fossil record is a palimpsest of survival and extinction, trial and error, opportunity and disaster. Most species die, many persist. Could a civilization, anticipating the coming apocalypse, engineer life to endure? A species unusually adapted to harsh conditions might be a living artifact, a final, desperate message encoded in DNA. Or, conversely, the simplification of ecosystems reduction to monocultures, dominance of hardy survivors, might reflect agricultural or environmental management on a planetary scale. Fossils are not cities or machines, but they may be the echoes of design. In this poetic yet scientific meditation, we return to the principle of subtlety. Deep time erases grand structures, but it preserves small, atomic, and chemical whispers. Isotopic fingerprints endure. The ratio of carbon-12 to carbon-13, altered by burning fossil fuels, is detectable for hundreds of millions of years. Nuclear decay products persist. Unnatural concentrations of rare elements, or synthetic molecules that cannot form without intelligence, leave an indelible mark. Here, the imagination and the rigor of science converge. We listen to the silent testimony of rocks, sediments, and fossils. We read between the lines of extinction events and sedimentary layers. Each anomaly is a letter, each pattern a sentence, forming a story whispered across the ages. As we contemplate these threads, a humbling truth emerges. Plate tectonics ensures forgetting. The Siberian traps remind us of catastrophe. The Silurian Hypothesis illuminates the subtlety of long-term evidence. Together, they anchor our journey. They transform what might feel like fanciful speculation into a disciplined exploration. Our search for Pangea's lost civilization becomes both a scientific thought experiment and a poetic reverie. We are detectives, tracing shadows in stone, reading echoes in isotopes, imagining life in layers long vanished. Consider for a moment the human perspective. Our current industrial age, the Anthropocene, will be read by future geologists long after our cities crumble and our plastics fragment. The fingerprints we leave may be subtle, a thin layer of carbon in sediment, a spike in isotopic ratios, traces of chemicals once pervasive. Our legacy from deep time may appear as a delicate scar, faint yet undeniable. the same patience and meticulous observation we now give to imagining Pangea's civilization could one day interpret our own story. And so, with these anchors of reality set, we continue our meditation. We acknowledge the forces that erase, the slow grind of continents, the floods and droughts, the fires and volcanoes. We recognize the scale of catastrophe, the fragility of life, the persistence of evidence. We honor the hypotheses that guide us and the subtle signals that persist. In this convergence of science, imagination, and contemplation, we are permitted to continue listening for the whispers in stone. In the quiet of our meditation, a profound humility takes hold. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. The earth does not declare definitively what has never been. It records softly, obliquely, subtly. Each sediment layer, each fossil, each isotopic anomaly is a note in a symphony, almost beyond comprehension. We read the music, interpret the rhythm, and imagine the hands that once played it. Whether or not Pangea harbored an industrial civilization is unknown. Yet, the method, the curiosity, and the rigor are real. They grant legitimacy to the search and beauty to the contemplation. And so we end this segment, standing on firm ground, yet gazing into the infinite. The physical rules of Earth, the cataclysm of the great dying, and the intellectual framework of the Silurian Hypothesis give our speculation form. They validate the poetic, the scientific, and the philosophical. The ghosts we chase may never fully reveal themselves, yet the pursuit illuminates more than their possible existence. It illuminates our understanding of the fragility and resilience of life, the impermanence of civilizations, and the patient, inscrutable memory of the earth itself. Let us take a final breath, letting the weight of these insights settle. Listen to the silent testimony of stone. Observe the scars and echoes, the isotopes and fossils, and imagine what story they might tell to the future. In these whispers of deep time, in these delicate, enduring records, the earth speaks in subtlety, and we, attentive and reflective, are permitted to listen. And so, our journey across the ocean of time finds its quiet shore. The forensic hunt is over. The anchors of reality have been set. We are left now, not with answers, but with a silence that is deeper and more resonant than when we began. Let us rest here for a while, in this space of wonder, and gently gather the threads of the path we have traveled together. We began with a sensory memory of a world that is not ours, the heat of a Pangean sun, the weight of its ancient air, the profound silence of a planet without a human voice. From that distant shore, we embarked on a search, not for things, but for the echoes of things. We listened for the faintest whispers in the geological record, for the scars of intention carved into the chaotic artistry of stone. We sought anomalies in the grand and tragic story of life itself, looking for a branch on the evolutionary tree that did not seem to grow by chance alone. And we descended deeper still into the invisible realm of the atom, searching for the indelible ink of a lost chemistry, a fingerprint that even the fires of the earth could not entirely erase. Let your mind linger on the world we imagined. Picture the continents stretching, unbroken, under a sun both familiar and strange. Vast deserts of ochre, sand, shimmer in heat that has no mercy. Mountains rise, jagged and dark, their peaks cutting into skies of azure and copper. Rivers snake through valleys, carving the earth with patience that is almost painful to perceive. Forests of ferns and towering conifers sway in winds that predate the first birds. You are here not as an observer, but as a quiet participant, breathing in the same atmosphere that ancient creatures once breathed, feeling the pulse of a living planet beneath your feet. And yet, our journey was never only about vision. It was about listening. The stones we walked upon have their own memory. Each layer of sediment, each fossilized shell, each crystal lattice speaks of time and pressure, of decay and renewal. They are not storytellers in our language, but they are meticulous archivists of a world that has lived and died countless times. And as we listened, we realized that the story of a civilization, should it have existed, would not shout from the rocks. It would whisper, it would leave traces almost imperceptible, detectable only by minds patient enough, observant enough, and willing to dwell in the slow rhythm of geological time. We then anchored this poetic search in the firm ground of science. We acknowledged the planet's power to forget the relentless engine of tectonics that consumes and renews. Plate tectonics is the law of forgetting written into the bones of the earth. Mountains rise only to fall again. Oceans swallow the continents, erasing cities and forests alike. Volcanoes reshape landscapes, burying histories in molten rock. Erosion smooths the scars of industry and conflict until they are indistinguishable from natural chaos. Every artifact, every trace, every whisper is subject to these forces. In this context, the faintest anomalies become more than curiosities. They become the ghosts that survived the storm of time. We stood before the terrible, fiery monument of the great dying, a catastrophe so vast it could hide any number of lost stories within its shadow. The Permian-Triassic boundary was not just an extinction event. It was a planetary crucible. Over 90% of marine species vanished. 70% of terrestrial vertebrates were gone. The oceans themselves became hostile, choked with carbon and toxic gases, leaving only the hardiest survivors. And yet, even in this devastation, there is a lesson. The traces left behind, fossils, sediment layers, isotopic signatures, are more than history. They are a testament to endurance. They are the residue of life itself, insisting on memory in a world determined to forget. And we found, in the intellectual courage of the Silurian Hypothesis, a formal permission to ask these profound questions, a validation of our search for the fingerprints of a deep intelligence. If an industrial civilization ever existed millions of years before our own, what might we see? We imagined the subtle chemical echoes, unusual carbon isotopes, remnants of synthetic molecules, faint radioactive traces. We imagined the faint scars on the landscape, layers of uniform sediment, unnatural monocultures of fossilized flora, species shaped in ways that defy pure evolutionary chance. The hypothesis allows us to hold a mirror to our own civilization, revealing not only what might have been, but what will inevitably be, written into stone for the distant future to discover. And now, having traveled through the immense corridors of time, what remains for us is reflection. It is a lesson in two forms of memory. There is the memory of a mind, of a civilization. It is a memory of stories, of names, of histories, of triumphs, and of sorrows. It is a memory built of thought, of language. It is as powerful as it is fragile, as transient as it is profound. It can be erased in an instant, yet it has the capacity to shape the universe of experience for countless generations. And then there is the memory of a planet. It is not sentimental. It is elemental. It is patient beyond comprehension. The earth does not remember the names of creatures, nor the songs they sang, nor the borders of empires, but it remembers pressure, heat, impact, decay. It remembers carbon locked in stone, the subtle distortion of isotopes, the whisper of tectonic movement. It records all and forgets selectively, not with malice, but with the inexorable logic of a system vast beyond imagination. In the eyes of this memory, a civilization is as ephemeral as frost on a window pane, present for a brief moment, glittering in its complexity, then absorbed into the whole once more. This humbling truth inevitably turns the mirror back upon ourselves. We, in our brief and incandescent moment, are now authors of a new planetary layer, the Anthropocene. For the first time in billions of years, a single species inscribes its will into the geological record. We build, we consume, we burn, we create, and the earth, patient and impartial, records it all. Every smog-filled sky, every buried plastic bottle, every nuclear signature, every monoculture is a stanza in the epic poem of humanity. What will our fingerprint look like to a mind 100 million years hence? Perhaps a thin seam of complex carbon, the ghostly remains of plastics and synthetic chemicals. Perhaps a sudden spike in atmospheric isotopes, a fever of industrial activity. Perhaps faint radioactive traces from our experiments with energy. Or fossils showing unprecedented simplification of ecosystems. These are not judgments, they are mere truths, silent, enduring truths, written into the bones of the earth. And yet, there is profound beauty in this reflection. Whether or not the lost civilization we sought truly existed, their hypothetical presence allows us to see our own in a new light. We too are a pattern of light on the surface of deep time. We too leave echoes for future listeners in the language of stone, in the flow of isotopes, in the imprint of life. And this thought is not fearsome. It is calming. even reverent. It reminds us of the continuity of existence, the delicate threads connecting past, present, and future. And now, let the need for answers fade. Let the questions themselves dissolve. There is nothing left to solve, nothing left to uncover. The intellectual journey is done. All that remains is the gentle landing. Allow yourself to drift, letting the mind rest. Let your awareness expand and contract with the rhythm of the planet itself. Sense the slow, silent turning of the earth beneath you. A rotation so steady, so inevitable, that it becomes a meditation in motion, a lullaby of cosmic patience. Imagine the deep, dark floor of the ocean. Tiny particles of sediment, dust of continents long gone, descend like slow snow. For millions of years, layer upon layer has accumulated, burying the stories of the past, creating the stone of the future. Let your thoughts settle with the same patient rhythm. Now, bring your attention to the air surrounding you. These atoms, ancient and eternal, have traveled across epochs. They were breathed by creatures of the Permian, stirred by winds of glaciers, inhaled by beings yet unborn. And now, for this fleeting moment, they are part of you. Inhale them, exhale slowly, and feel your connection to the unbroken story of the earth. Let go of the images of Pangea, of geological ghosts, of extinct species. They have served their purpose. They have brought you to this quiet shore. The silence around you is not emptiness. It is the fullness of the planet's memory. The stillness is not absence. It is the patience of the cosmos, holding all stories in its deep, indifferent embrace. The great, quiet engine of the earth continues its work. Continents drift imperceptibly. Mountains rise, crumble, and vanish. Oceans shift and swell. Life persists, fragile yet unyielding. And we, transient as we are part of this rhythm. In feeling it, in meditating upon it, we touch a piece deeper than comprehension. We are both infinitesimal and infinite, a whisper in the vast narrative of time. And so, the story ends not with a conclusion, but with an invitation to rest, to dream, to let your mind flow with the slow, eternal pulse of the planet. There is nothing more to resolve, nothing more to chase, only the river of time carrying you gently forward. This was another story in the endless river of time. And now, let it carry you gently into sleep. Good night, dreamer of ages.